The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild was the first Zelda game for a lot of people, and while I don't think it's representative of the franchise at large, it's a great game, and a great introduction to the franchise. The game strays from a lot of series conventions, but one that it doesn't stray from at all is the inclusion of its title character, Zelda herself. Let's get this out of the way. Literally the most common Zelda joke in and outside of the fanbase is any joke referencing the name. Because, well, that's not Zelda, that's Link. But there's a good reason why the series is called The Legend of Zelda, and this may just be conjecture, but bear with me. In every game that Zelda is in, she plays a pivotal role. Even before she was a real character, she served a more central purpose than Link. Link is a self-insert. Calling it The Legend of Link would be no different from calling it the Legend of Anon, or something. Zelda is the most consistently present character in the entire series. One way that I've been making the most of my time at home is my Zelda marathon. I've been revisiting and beating a Zelda game every month since July, and in this time I've observed a lot about Zelda as a character and her different iterations. Zelda is one of the most versatile title characters in gaming, mainly because she's not just one character. There are a bunch of Zeldas throughout the timeline. My personal favorite is Skyward Sword Zelda. I love how, unlike the others, she isn't royalty, but she still has to grapple with a higher purpose. I also love Zelda in Ocarina of Time. More so than any other Zelda, from the very beginning she takes things into her own hands and guides you throughout your entire journey. Twilight Princess Zelda is a matriarch who has to put everything on the line to do what's best for her kingdom, and her sacrifice speaks volumes. I also really like Tetra, but I don't like when characters just flip a switch and become different people, and I don't think there's a more literal example of that than Tetra. Anyway, way at the bottom of the tier list, there's Breath of the Wild Zelda. Okay, now obviously I'm exaggerating a little, right? Like, in what world is Breath of the Wild Zelda worse than the original Zelda? But like, yeah, she's kinda lacking. And I'm talking beyond the fact that they made a Canadian woman do a British accent. Like, why did they do that? And yeah, Breath of the Wild is at a huge disadvantage. With the exception of one scene, every time we see Zelda in this game is in a flashback. Writers have been saying since the beginning of literature that we should be showing, not telling. But this is still showing, right? Well, yeah, but this isn't literature, this is a video game. Video games are capable of doing a lot more than showing or telling. They can convey a story through interactive means. And don't get me wrong, I don't think that The Legend of Zelda has ever been very good at bridging the gap between interactivity and character development, but this isn't even a possibility when the character you're trying to develop exists in a time that's separate from the one your gameplay takes place in. They could have pulled and bear with me, they could have pulled The Last of Us 2 and made the flashbacks playable and not just cutscenes. In fact, from a gameplay perspective, that would have given me much greater incentive to find all the memories, because as it stands, I can just look them all up on YouTube and have the same experience. But outside of just straight up weird storytelling decisions, the portrayal of Zelda in this game is a flawed one. The big difference between this Zelda and a lot of others is that she's a failure? I mean, maybe failure isn't the right word. Let me explain. Zelda's main arc in this game has to do with the lead up to the battle with Ganon, and the story here is simple. She can't figure out how to use her powers, like, the whole time. And she gets mood swings because of it. And hey, there's nothing wrong with that. It makes sense that she'd be stressed out. I mean, we're talking about the lead up to the most important moment in her entire life, the fight with Ganon. But we were a little misled. I mean, it's not like the marketing didn't show the more vulnerable sides of Zelda, but there's a reason why most of the promotional art features Zelda in her explorer outfit and not her dress. I and many others thought this would be a game with a badass version of Zelda, but the actual game took an entirely different route. And this isn't my way of saying that I'm a dude bro who's like, I only like action, I want to see Zelda do stuff and fight dudes. No, not at all. If that was what I wanted, I'd just play Hyrule Warriors. Earlier I said that my favorite Zelda is Skyward Sword Zelda, and the entire reason for that is the introspective aspects of her as a character. And that's actually my biggest issue with Zelda in Breath of the Wild. Sure, there's an introspective aspect of her character, you know, the internal struggle of duty. But I've seen this song and dance before, and it's done worse here. Zelda from Breath of the Wild isn't anywhere near as endearing as Skyward Sword Zelda. Sure, there are some things there, but anyone with a brain can tell you why Zelda in Breath of the Wild feels the way she does, and yet it feels like the writing in the game goes out of its way to actively make you not sympathize with her. Just look, I mean, half of the scenes with her and Link are just her getting mad at Link for following orders and trying to help her. And the payoff, you know, her huge confrontation with Ganon, isn't even something we get to see. Remember, show, don't tell, right guys? We don't get to see Zelda fighting Ganon before we arrive, you know, for those 100 years that she was there. When we fight Ganon at the end of the game, where is Zelda? She's been fighting Ganon all these years, right? Why does she just appear out of nowhere at the end of the fight? Yes, I'm aware that we get to see Zelda sealing Ganon away at the end of the fight. But this isn't the end of Zelda's arc. This is the end of Zelda's arc with you. This is Zelda capitalizing off of your work, not her own. I would have liked to see her beating Ganon up before you arrived. Doing so would have fixed most of my issues because hey, at least there'd be a payoff. More importantly though, this doesn't feel earned. I gotta say, Zelda does give a banger line here.
But courage need not be remembered, for it is never forgotten.
But is this the same Zelda who yelled at us for following orders? Well, short answer? No. This is a Zelda who's more mature and aware of the duty she struggles with early on. But it feels like there's some sort of a gap. It feels like there should be 5 more memories. Because the jump from this Zelda to this Zelda is way too drastic. In conclusion, she's one of the weaker iterations of the character in the series. I have yet to play Age of Calamity, and maybe they'll fix some issues in that game. They're giving this version of Zelda a lot of time, a whole trilogy even. I have no doubt they can flesh her out in all those games. But as it stands, looking at Zelda as a standalone character in Breath of the Wild? Yeah, not too great.